All right, welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to expand on our application and we're going to learn about Odoo functional fields or calculated fields. Now, remember in our previous lecture, we just added what's called a relation field or a related field to our meals item model. And so I'm going to bring that up so you can see it, just to remind you that we created this calories field here, type fields.integer, that's related to our item ID calories to pull that out and display it in our meal item model. So that's how we can now have calories per serving showing up here for us inside of our meal items. It just pulls it right over from the product table, the calories field that we added. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a field that's going to allow us to total up these calories per serving that we have here and display it for our entire meal at the top. So this is an important lecture. It's especially important for people trying to break out of the very basic Odoo development where you're basically adding fields to models and adding fields to views and those things. And in this case, we're really going to do some functional things. So to get started, if we're creating a functional field, we know we're going to get started in our model here. And we're going to go right to the model that we want to add our functional field to. And remember when I said that we're going to want to total up the calories that are down here are available for our item. We want to total those up for our meal. So let's go ahead and begin by creating a field called total calories. And it's going to be an integer too, because we're just adding up integers. There's not going to be any half integers or anything like that. And here we're going to give it a string of what we want to call it. We'll just call it total calories. And we're going to tell Odoo that we do want to store this calculated field in our table. And now comes where we actually tell Odoo what function we want to call to do our calculation. So we say compute equals, and just give a name for our function. I'm going to use an underscore, and I'm going to say calculate, or we'll just use calc calories, just like that. And that's the whole line. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so it's a little easier to read. But that's the whole line. And so we're telling Odoo here that we want to create a field called integers. And this string right here that we're defining is just what we want to name our field. So what it'll show up inside of our list views and so forth. And in this case, it's the total meal calories we could type. And we're going to store the result inside of here so we can total it up and do calculations and everything else. And notice here that we have compute equals, and so this is going to be the method that Odoo is going to call, and we're going to have to create this to do our calculations, but it's going to be a very, very simple method. So we can put this method to do this calculation right above our field so they're kind of together, and we know that when we see total calories, we can look right above it and see the method that's going to do the calculation. So let's go ahead and write the method first. I'm going to use def for defining. If def is an easy way to just think define our calculate or calc calories. And so notice how this is named. This underscore is kind of hard to see here. Now you can see it. Calc calories matches what we have here, and you can even copy and paste it just to make sure you got it exact. And just like other things in programming, we just have a syntax here that we know that we have to have self that's going to get basically passed along this entire class. Our res.users.meal gets passed along to our method so we can do what we need to do. And when we're doing our calculations, we need a lot of times variables to hold them. And so in this case, we're going to say current calories equals 0. And I misspelled that a little bit, so we're going to get that right. Current calories equals 0. So that's going to hold our variable as we total up our calories. Now, if you looked at our Python primer for Odoo in one of the previous sections, you will see that we did a for loop through a collection of different items. We did them through lists. We also did them through dictionaries. And what we are going to do right now is do the same thing. We're going to loop for all of the menu items. I'm going to say meal items in self.item IDs. And notice how Eclipse is helping us out a little bit here. It's showing us that when we type self.item, the item IDs is one of the fields that are available to us. And we put that colon on the end. And now what this is going to be doing is it's looping through all of our items that are within our meal. It's looping through them, and we're assigning them this meal item. So at this point, we can say current calories, and notice it also gets found, equals current calories. So we're just going to add to itself, because each time through the loop, we might have more to add. So just to be real explicit here, and there are shortcuts, but we're doing it here to be real specific. That we're taking current calories, and then we're taking itself, and we're also adding to it our meal item. And now, because we have an object to this model meal item, we can use our period here to reference inside of it our item ID. And then we know that the item itself has calories. And look how even Eclipse is smart enough to find that for us. So we're just going to leave it like that for now. And notice that we're looping through all the meal items that are in our item ID. So if there's none, nothing will happen here. If there's one meal item, then it'll come through once. If there's two meal items, it'll come through a second time. And again, we do have that Odoo Python primer. You can go back and look at those loops and how we loop through items. And some of that should now start to become clear as we transfer it over here to our actual Odoo application. So now once we have looped through all of our items and we've totaled up our calories, we can assign them. So we type self.total calories, and notice as soon as I type the TOT, Eclipse gives us total calories. So this is another good reason to use Eclipse and install it and hook it up to your project, because it's going to make it a little easier for you to make sure you have your syntax right. But notice how we just say self.total calories equals current calories. And that's it. That's all we have to do. And we've created our first functional field. We're calling it here with compute. It calls it. It sets our calories to 0. We loop through all our meal items. Right here, we're adding them on. Each of the meal items, we look up the item ID and get our calories. And once we've done all of these, we fall out of the loop, and notice how our indentation comes back to here. And that's how we know everything indented here is in the loop, and everything outside out here is not in the loop. And we just assign total calories equal to this calculation we have. And now there's one more step that we have to do, is we have to tell Odoo when to call this. And if we're calling it, say we're in a tree view, we could have hundreds of meals possibly in there. And we might have, and if that's the case, and there's anything has changed, we need to get that. And so this at API.1, and you'll see that's also going to get found by Eclipse, and we got to make sure here at the top, it's one more thing we have to do, is we have to add API here. So from OpenERP, we've pulled in models, we've pulled in fields. Now we got to pull in API, because we're using a new feature of the Odoo 8 API that these are sometimes called decorators that are going to tell the Odoo framework when to call this method and when to call this function. And the at API.1, you just have to know that that means it's going to call this automatically for every single time it's with this model is being used. So if you're in a tree view that has 10 meals in it, the API is automatically going to call this each time for each of those meals and do the calculations. You don't have to worry about how it does it. And you can read here a little bit how it says the decorated method automatically loops on the records and makes a list with the results. So this handles us not having to loop through all of the meals to get the total calories. If there's more than one, it'll automatically handle that in the framework. Now the next thing we need is what this calculation depends on. So think of that. What could change that would make us have to recalculate our meal? And one of the things that's going to change is the item IDs. So if I go in here and I just put item IDs, this tells our meal model that anytime item IDs change, meaning we add an item or we take an item out, a menu item, if any of those IDs change, we need to recalculate our total calories, because that means if we've added one, that means we could have added calories in, obviously, if we delete one out. Now there's one more condition. What if our serving size change? Well, if our serving sizes change, we also need to recalculate. And right now, we're not checking for serving sizes in here, but we can go ahead and get ready for when we do. So we're going to go ahead and put servings in here as well. So it's going to look inside of item IDs, and if any of them, the servings have changed, then we want as well to recalculate our calories. So we're going to save this. So we have our model saved, and we're going to go ahead and stop our server and restart it. And this also falls into just a common design habit that I get into, is if I'm adding fields to my model, I will usually stop and start the server, make sure those fields have been added and there's no errors. Then I will add the field to my view. So now we can walk over here to the Diet Facts view, and up here, not in the tree, but in our meal at the top, in the header of our form for our meal, I think you know what we need to type in here. We're just going to type in total calories like that and hit save. And now we're going to restart again. And make sure there's no errors. Let's jump over here to our meals. And something to keep in mind, watch what happens when we go in here. Look at what happens. Boom, 648. There it is. It's added up and totaled our calories. So it saw that change. It applied it, knew we needed to recalculate that field. If I go in here now and change this to, we're not doing time servings yet, so let's get rid of that. Let's just delete one. So we're going to delete this loaded baked potato. And notice how in real time it's changing our total meal calories right here. If I get rid of this one, it's gone. So we've got the calculations working. You can see we got total meal calories here. If we edit and add, let's pick a meal item. We're going to go with, let's see, a loaded baked potato. We got our 412 in there. We'll go ahead and put the one serving in. Save and close. Look how it's totaled up our total meal calories in the header. If we go here to our list view, we don't have a tree, so we're going to do that in our next exercise that we do in our next video. We're going to do a couple of things to make it a little more friendly, and to see how we can add this to our tree view. So we'll see you in the next lecture.